in the interim that
Yeah, you
that
could all
meets.
provide individual comments. I mean, certainly don't email the whole commission
Right, okay.
because of open meetings laws, but you
Yeah.
you can email staff your individual comments. That would actually be really helpful
Okay.
if you all have time to do that.
Okay, that's.
So on this discussion of point of order, how's this side of the table feeling? 4 hours?
Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'll call to order the November 9th, 2023 Louisville Planning Commission meeting with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Choi.
Here.
Commissioner Krantz.
Here.
Commissioner Basket.
Here.
Commissioner Mullane.
Here.
Commissioner Howe.
Here.
Commissioner Osterman.
Here.
Chair Brown Eyes.
Here. Great to have everybody here in person. Move into a motion to approve this evening's agenda, please.
So moved?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Looking at the minutes for September and October, I had a couple of formatting issues where I've asked staff to revisit to be certain that the full agenda is provided on page 1 of the minutes for any given month. And another note was,
there's a few things. How names are bolded.
right,
And
bolding
how there's
names.
a line break.
Right.
And then there was one other thing. The roll call
Oh, right.
vote was not included. in
Right.
the- yeah.
There were some motions where the roll call vote hadn't been included in the minutes. And so those will be edited into the minutes. That said, does anybody have any other notes they wanted to correct or recharacterize from either of the September or October minutes? Seeing none? Thank you all. Then a motion, what's that?
I'll move approval of the 2 months of minutes that we have before us.
September and October 2023.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any specific abstentions? That one, we have to check into.
I don't
Seeing none? Seeing none, thank you. Do we have anybody who wanted to speak for public comment on items not on the agenda? Okay. And I don't know, I don't have the online view right now as to, is there any, nobody? Okay. All right, thank you. Then we are going to move into essentially continued business, although we didn't actually continue it, so it's also a new item, sort of. So I'll selectively read from our script because it's not because we're just discussing the housing plan. So I will now open the public hearing on a request for a housing plan. What a great idea. The purpose of the hearing is to receive evidence regarding the housing plan and provide a public forum for all interested parties who wish to comment on the housing plan. So with that said, I will invite staff up for a brief recap, and then we'll just move into the discussion of it. This is one of those kind of rare times where we can just sit around and discuss something that's kind of truly planning, so.
So thank you. I'm going to be really brief, like 2 to 3 minutes, because if you recall, and happy to go into more detail and kind of recap where we're at, if that's helpful. But if you recall, last month in October, we brought the housing plan before you as a discussion item. We had our consultants here do a presentation and present the final housing needs assessment. We as staff provided a presentation too. It was late enough in the night relative to how much information there was and the need to give this sort of the right amount of time for discussion. So it was essentially continued, although it's not a public hearing technically, I don't think, but it was continued to tonight. And so that's your only topic for tonight. We wanted to make sure there's plenty of time for discussion. So I'm just going to get you back into the headspace of kind of where we're at. The purpose of tonight is really to look at this. This is just a visual. I know you can't read it, but to look at the action matrix or framework that we had presented to you last time. And so we have 3 questions that I'll pull up on the screen here that we're sort of asking you to weigh in on. But essentially, this is, if you'll recall, sort of the foundation for the actual housing plan draft and a lot of the actions. So this is sort of the outline or the framework, and we're at the stage now where we want to know what's missing, what sort of resonates with you, what more information do you need. Are there opportunities to condense some of this, for example, rather than 29, maybe something less, those types of things. So that's the purpose of tonight. And again, these are the 3 questions in your packet. What do you think might be missing from this list? Which one of these jump out at you, resonate with you? What additional information do you need? Thank you to Deborah and Tamar for providing written comments on this matrix. That was included in your packet as well. It might give you a head start, or they may want to go first. So it's however you want to handle it. We're just going to sort of be in listen mode as staff and here for questions. Couple options are you could go commissioner by commissioner and just sort of do it that way, or you could go action by action, whatever's most helpful. So let us know we're here. We've got a bunch of stuff we could pull up, but we'll just sit back and listen for
All
now.
right. For action by action, how, do you have slides that would delineate that?
I mean, I've got the whole matrix I could
Yeah.
pull up, and happy to do that if that would be helpful, and kind of stand up here and go that way. The font is going to be really small up there, but
Right.
happy to do that. Yeah.
Why don't we take a quick peek at that and see whether visually it helps us at all?
So I could zoom in a bit.
Yeah, thoughts? Do you want to jump into topic or process?
Process
Yeah,
a
okay,
little bit.
please, yes.
So I kind of would like to recap a little bit of the high points of the housing needs assessment. Because we looked at it twice, I read it twice. That's what happens when you're retired, you have time to read things twice. But I think it's a really important piece of work. And I want, no more foreshadowing, just like laying it out there. This is setting the stage for the comprehensive plan. It's probably some of the most important decisions that we're going to make about the composition of the community in terms of what kind of recommendation we want to make to change policies and actions that could lead to more housing. So what we know from the report is the report finds that there's a gap of 2,483 units of housing that we'll need to accommodate a population of 24,600 people. So a lot of this is based, obviously, on the census. The context is Boulder County, what our share of the population is. And I think it's really good metric information. I think we need to see it through a filter of, is that what we want for the community? And I've talked to people, since we're allowed to talk to people about this, on all ends of the spectrum, where some people are like, oh, 4,000 more people, 24,000 more units, that's not so much to have. And people that are like, no, why do we have to take any of that? You know, just because we're part of Boulder County's plan that says we have to do some housing. So I think our opportunity is to see how that feels to us with what we know about the community. And staff isn't necessarily asking us to comment on the outcome of the report. So I accept the facts that are in the report. I think then it gets into the area of policy making where we need to think about what is the best thing for the community. So I just wanted to preface the conversation like that.
Very much appreciate that.
That's
Yeah,
great.
that's really helpful. Thanks. Any other preface comments? Yeah.
Yeah, and I also really appreciated there was, so much great demographic data and really interesting information in the report. But I've also spoken to many people who feel different ways, like we need to attract more business. In order to get more business, we need more housing. We need we need to control our growth. So I think that what you're saying, Commissioner Baskett, is that we should accept the findings of the report and assume that we're going to move forward with our comments on the strategy based on a 2,400 additional housing unit number? Or are you suggesting that suggesting that we don't go backwards and question that? I was just wondering.
So always about questioning authority. So I I accept the metric and the methodology that led to the information in the report. Looks pretty factual to me. But then this next step of what do we actually want to do? How do we want to change policy, zoning, incentives, the strategies list to actualize that? And I do want to raise the question because what I just said, I think we need to say, do we need to plan for this ultimate, do we need to accept that we must change policies to accommodate the growth that the report tells us is going to happen?
Right, okay, so then I would like to maybe disagree a little bit in saying that we do need to question what the report says needs to happen as we evaluate our strategies.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Please, yeah. Thank you, yeah.
So I think this has been something that's been a bit of a mantra of mine, is that pro rata share of growth is just a factual number that's data from the state. I think the policies stand on their own in a lot of ways, regardless of whether we try to hit a particular target number of housing units, or we're just trying to be more inclusive and get more affordable housing and housing types that are not just affordable, but workforce housing, senior housing. Like all of those policies are still applicable, whether you're trying to achieve 2,000 units or 1,000 units or 500 units. Any of those policies could help achieve the goals generally. So I think we could probably, that's a big conversation that we could also have with the comprehensive plan about, and I think cities are trying to get away from population caps. There's actually state laws now that say you can't have population caps. So that's just my 2 cents. I think focusing on, are these good policies regardless of that pro rata share number, might be a good discussion still that helps form the plan.
Sorry, I'm just going
Yeah.
to jump in. This is free form,
I
right?
wholeheartedly agree with that thought. Go ahead.
This is free form, right? We're just
Yeah.
talking. Okay. So I agree with what you're saying, right? Data are data. They don't really lie unless you're a really good graduate student, and then you figure out how to make the data support your hypothesis. But to what you're saying, right, about what do we want to focus on in terms of kind of how we move forward, what are the basis of what we include from our considerations in the comprehensive plan, all of those things, right? We're looking at data, projections, information, numbers based on stuff related to Boulder County and the other municipalities within Boulder County. Just one comment or one thought that I had as I was going through all of this was, every piece of data that's presented in there is presented in a way where it is Louisville amongst Superior, Erie, Lafayette, Boulder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't necessarily, I want to caution myself away from forming any opinions or perspectives based on what Louisville is doing compared to Lafayette, compared to Boulder, compared to Superior, right? And focus on what does Louisville want to do for Louisville. That being said, right, understanding that the maths behind the numbers that are presented in the report are true, and they just say, more people are coming, things are getting bigger. We have to be considerate of what that impact is because, although it's not really included in the report to any significant degree, if people don't move to Superior, Louisville, Lafayette, or Erie, they're going to move to Broomfield because Broomfield has no shame about building lots of houses. And there's a certain character that affects us where you might not know that one side of the street is Broomfield and the other side of the street is Louisville. And if we want to try to develop an approach to growth as part of a comprehensive plan, we have to consider, while not necessarily be driven by, the adjacencies, even if they're not in Boulder County. So.
Thanks, yeah, because I don't think our discussion this evening is going to come up with a number, whether that's 0 or 2,000 plus. And so, I think because this is the draft plan or approaches and strategies before us, then if we focus our discussion on those, whether this is a good approach for the city. So, please.
I think, so I appreciate actually really very much so, all of your comments thus far. Your comments made me think of a couple of things, and one is, I think when I looked at us compared to the other communities, I guess one of the things that stuck out in those comparisons, and then also in other parts of the report, was the lack of affordability in our town in particular. And I think that's one thing that I think I'm hopeful that the housing plan can look at. And I think, at least for me, it starts to tie into some of the other comprehensive plan and just other issues for the town, which is sort of some inclusivity and equality issues. And I really think that once the town becomes a place where the people that are able to work here can't afford to live here anymore, that to me is a real problem. And one of those numbers that stuck out was, and I'm not going to get it right exactly, but it was something like 29% of the current homeowners in the town couldn't afford their house now.
74,
26, I think.
26 cannot afford.
Cannot afford.
26% could.
Could, yes, 26%.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
could.
26 could. Yes.
74%
Sorry,
could not.
I miss. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, for me, I just that's a big deal, and I think for me, I want our community to recognize this is a really important issue, and I think the whole community is going to have to. If we want to take this as a really serious issue, I think we should. I think most people in the community feel we should. We're going to have to look at as many of these actions and strategies as we can. And again, if we want to try and solve some of these things, it probably is going to touch every part of the city and every neighborhood. I mean, I think if we're going to try and address this, and again, I think we should, it will need to have a big impact on the town and our work on the comprehensive plan. So anyway, that's my little
Perfect,
prologue.
yeah. No, so all of that said, I think with these three questions on screen, are there any of the strategies that people wanted to discuss in particular? Were there any that stuck out that you felt were, well, it's hard to speak to what's missing, but yeah.
Yeah, I had a question. So, I really like a number of these strategies, and I'll just use the numbers for them, like number 1, number 5. I really appreciate, additional opportunities for residential development as number 1. Number 5 says support more flexible infill development. My question was on number 2, where it's titled Adopt Code Allowances for More Diverse Housing Development. Again, I like the idea of what I think the strategy is, but I'm curious about why the word allowances was put in there, as opposed to just adopt code that supports more diverse housing development. Is it something where the strategy was developed to kind of provide an exception from the code or an allowance from, a deviation from the code? Or is it, hey, we just want to adopt a code that supports more diverse housing development?
Yeah, it's probably good question. It's definitely worth clarification. I think what we're getting at with that is there are areas of town where housing might be allowed as a special review use or a conditional use. And I think there's been a lot of discussion about allowing housing, not broadly across the city, but in strategic areas as a use by right instead of that special review use, because that would help spur the housing development, because it would give assurances to a potential developer. It could also mean property that isn't zoned for residential that could be rezoned for residential as well. Because it's not allowed, so to allow it. So that, I would interpret it as being one of those two. And again, I think just for clarity, I think it's not calling for broad rezoning to residential, but looking strategically where infrastructure is, where transit is, where it makes the most sense to transition to housing.
Thanks.
Yeah, Commissioner Krantz.
Yeah, just to follow up on that one, it says here that stakeholder engagement revealed that portions of our zoning code are outdated and in need of a major update. So I'm just wondering if we could clarify who the stakeholders were that said that, and which are the outdated parts that are, I mean, are there specific code numbers that are outdated and in need of a specific update?
So, I mean, we had a couple of public open houses, and we did stakeholder interviews. So we don't have the consultant here. I don't know exactly what they're referring to. I think they're probably referring to the stakeholder interviews, which, I don't know, there were, several dozen. We had a round that was open to the general public, and then we had a more targeted round of folks in the community on the stakeholder interview portions. Are there portions of the code? Yes. I mean, we haven't identified them now. I mean, I could probably our code was written, the majority of our code was written in, I think, the 70s and the 80s, maybe, and there have been targeted updates, but the majority of our code is several decades old, and I'd say doesn't reflect modern land use policy and codes that you would see in most cities.
And I think with those types of issues at this time, really, I think we want to focus more discussion on the strategies, because those are giant unknowns. Yeah, I'd love to welcome you guys up. So, actually, but we need you in the microphone. I'd actually like to welcome you up right now if you wanted to have something to start with. Yeah, both of you.
Okay.
So.
Thanks so much, Sherry Summer, 910 South Palisade Court. So out on the campaign trail where I knocked on every door with my friend, my teammate, we talked to a lot of people, and I just say, hey, what do you love about Louisville? And like everyone, except for like 2 people who said I like the location, said, I love the small town character. I love that it's easy to get around. I love that it's safe. I love that we're not congested traffic. I love, these are the things I love. So I feel like, okay, don't mess that up. So how do we not mess that up? I like Commissioner Baskett's idea that we need to look at what kind of policies are good for our town, not the numbers, because there's a lot of different ways to approach this problem, and I think that's extremely wise. There's one thing that I want to think about, though, is I knocked on many doors, and there are many, many people who've moved here a month ago, or 2 months ago, or 5 months ago, or I moved here 12 years ago. So new people are continually coming. So this is not a county-wide, growth is not a county-wide issue. It's like nationwide, it's international. People will move here from everywhere. And the demand is inexhaustible. And so when we say, let's solve a problem, like, how do you solve a problem that is infinite? It's like those bowls of soup where you're eating and they keep pumping soup up and you keep eating because more keeps coming up. So how do we define it? And so one thing I had thought of, I agree with Commissioner Moline, it's like people who live here should be able to work here, right? And so that's one thing that I was saying, like, how could we prioritize those people and make affordable housing for people who work here or live here and can't afford here? But according to federal regulations, like if you take any federal money for any projects, you can't do that. So that's illegal. So you have to, if you're doing something that includes funding sources, you can't do that, although I think that would be a great idea, like to prioritize people who are part of our community already. We also just need to define affordability, because that's like a big nebulous thing that we're talking about. We don't even have a definition for. Yeah, we can't build our way out of this. The demand is inexhaustible, and we need to think about the fiscal impacts. And also, one last thing I want to say is I'm really concerned for people in our town, because so many people said, I own a house, but the property taxes are getting so high. The inflation is getting so bad. I don't know if I'm going to continue to live here. So we may be thinking, oh, we need to solve a problem from other people that we don't even know yet. But we need to think about the people who do live here. And there's, there are people who are on the edge. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have anybody online, just to double check? No? Okay, great, thanks. Were you interested in, no? Thanks. All right, so maybe, do you have any specific strategies that you wanted to also focus on?
Really hard to go back and forth between the tiny
Yeah.
print and the thing, but I
Right.
want to make another kind of overarching statement and reaction.
All right.
So how do we solve this problem the way you eat an elephant, one bite at a time? And that's what these policies will help do. And what we know is that from the report, 64% of Louisville workers live outside the city and commute in. That's a lot of people. I don't know if we want to take care of all of them, or if we want to look at the tier that says we need 1,000 units of affordable housing. So I don't mean to like just spin on the metrics, but I'm trying to get us thinking in terms of what these policies and strategies actually do. So, for example, the incentive-based policies are critical to affordable housing. How can we use the money from Initiative 123? How can we do partnerships with whether it's Boulder Housing Authority or whoever we do? I think that those policies are particularly important if the outcome that the Planning Commission wants to steer towards is this is going to go to those that need it the most. So there's a filter to see it through.
Can I propose a discussion that focuses on what I see as the confluence of strategies 1, 2, and 5? So again, just to list them, strategy 1, quick name, identify opportunities for residential development. Number 2, adopt code allowances for more diverse housing development. And number 5, support more flexible infill development. So when we talk about growth, when we talk about affordable housing, when we talk about, being able to support workforce housing, things like that, nothing is going to change or nothing is going to move the dial on those topics when we talk about the downtown area or any of the neighborhoods or areas of town that are currently built up or in the process of being rebuilt. Because that's around downrange, right? Those things have already happened. Those houses are already there, and that's not where the big shifts are going to occur. In the contemplation of 2,400 new housing units for the city, right? We can't just spread those houses apart that are existing and slide another one in between each one. It's going to be impacting the areas that are undeveloped or underdeveloped that, in my opinion, we need to be proactive and focus on how those areas are going to be utilized to plan for the growth that is coming, right? It's like the movie Austin Powers, right, where he's driving the steamroller and the guy's like, no, and he's, get out of the way, but he's only driving like a mile an hour, so they sit there talking about it for 5 minutes before he gets run over. Like, that's what this problem is. It's coming, we all know it's coming, growth is happening, and we need to be able to move quickly enough to get out of the way of the steamroller. So, the areas of town that are undeveloped or underdeveloped that are not currently supported by the appropriate zoning to allow for the right type of residential development. I think those are the areas that somehow, if we can, talk about these strategies, and I see 1, 2, and 5 as kind of,
So,
coalescing around that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I think, those are the ones that resonate with me in terms of strategies to have more development and focus and concerted effort, because I think that's where the juice is worth the squeeze.
so again, numbers aside, if you look at those strategies, 1, 2, and 5, what do you see when you stare at these 3 questions that are on the screen?
I'm not going to answer the second bullet point because I think I just said that, what resonates with me. But what's missing, right, is, so let me put it this way. I'm going through an effort right now, in my professional life where we are taking a novel approach to solving a problem, right? And the way we're taking a novel approach is by maybe segmenting the normal process a little bit, doing 80% of the work up front, and then putting in a piece right here that says, hey, we're going to do all of our work up front to define what we want. We're going to put this out to industry, and then before industry fully comes back with a response, we're also going to put in this new piece that says, okay, we want now, based on your initial response, to put out another request for innovation where we think we knew what we were asking for to begin with. You came back with an initial response, and based on those responses, now I'm going to ask you guys, and I'm going to pick this and this and this and this and this from these different people. And now I really want you all to now innovate on these new pieces. So, you know, the normal process, right, says, hey, somebody sees a vacant lot of land, or somebody sees a property that they want to buy. They come up with an idea how they want to use it. They figure out how their idea doesn't match with the code that's allowed for that area of land. They ask for variances, they put in a request, you know, and then it gets contemplated. I think we need to kind of separate that normal process a little bit and identify, especially for these areas that are or underdeveloped, you know, how can we innovate in terms of creating new opportunities to get responses from industry that are very atypical from what our code is, that to date has left these areas or underdeveloped, you know, outside of what we're really looking for.
So yeah, do these strategies as written point us towards that?
Let's discuss. I don't know, because again, I don't know what's missing from those in terms of what they could be.
Okay. Mr. Moline.
Yeah, I guess maybe one question I have, because I hear what Commissioner Choi is saying, and I'm curious, it seems like what we're maybe talking about, at least in the context that you just raised, is looking at different places in the city. So I'm kind of curious how the housing stuff will make its way into the comp plan, because it seems like that would be the next like if we were going to start talking about re-looking at, I don't know, the area west of McCaslin or something, you know, like an area that currently has lots of office and that kind of stuff, but lots of vacant land as well. I mean, if we were going to do something different there and try and address some housing, that seems like it would need to go and be an important part of the comp plan. I don't know, would you care to comment?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think with the comprehensive plan, you'll often look at what you want your future land uses to be. You look at existing zoning, existing uses. There's a lot of discussion about, I think we do have a firm as part of our comp plan team that's doing a market study to understand what are market-supported uses. I think we are going to look at fiscal balance. That's always an important part of looking at, say, a whole district or a whole corridor, which we've done in the past. We have we have corridor plans, but this is the opportunity to say, are there changes that we could revitalize the areas? Could we make them more economically viable? Housing could be part of that mix. I don't think, if you want economic development and economic vitality, I don't think that exclusively means commercial zoning. I think that was one way to think about it, but in the way things develop now and the way our market, if you really study our market potential and the types of businesses that could be within our commercial corridors, residential can be part of that vitality mix to make the commercial viable. And so we're going to study that and try to understand what the right mix is, but that there could be some synergy with housing and economic vitality.
One specific example of how this could play into the comp plan is, so one of the strategies
Closer to the mic.
Is it not on?
Or mic closer to you. Yeah, it's on, but it's not picking up yet.
One of the strategies is to sort of develop criteria for what these appropriate areas are that could change to residential. So this is incremental, right? But we're hopeful that the housing plan, for example, has some of that criteria in terms of being served by transit, some definition of what underutilized is, some other factors to where when we go into the future land use map sort of exercise of the comp plan. So the comp plan, this doesn't assign land use changes in itself, it just sets the comp plan does that, but that could give us a huge head start for looking at the future land use map and figuring out where those areas are. So I think there's several pieces like that that are embedded in the action framework that we could parse out if you want, but it's a great comment, totally on our mind.
So those are the strategies that really resonate with me, to answer that question.
Commissioner Krantz.
Should we go through, I feel we haven't heard from Commissioner Osterman or Commissioner Howe yet. Should we go through and just answer these questions really quickly? Each of us? I provided mine in writing, so I haven't heard what everybody else thinks of these. If everybody else has answers to these questions, I appreciate Commissioner Choi's, but I'd like to hear what.
Can you recap yours, maybe?
Sure.
Yeah?
I mean, but I didn't necessarily mean to jump in and start myself, but I'd be happy to. Yeah, interestingly, I thought that that strategies 3 and 6 resonated with me the most, which is interesting. What I thought was missing was strategies that addressed specifically people who were displaced or maybe still displaced by the Marshall Fire. And the additional information that I wanted, I put in a list of things that I thought might be good for us to evaluate all of them, and that's more of a broad question. But I thought that in addition to the column that says income level served, we could add some other columns that would be things like how much, like impact to the community, long-term costs, what are the economic impacts, how does it affect our tax base, how does it score by environmental attributes, and I thought we could look at this, we could evaluate, the information that's missing is, a lot of it is in the report, but it's not in the matrix, and I think that adding, if we could each give a note on, well, yeah, this one is great for sustainability, this one is great for low cost, more houses, and we could evaluate it that way.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Did anybody else want to actually call out any strategies that resonate with them or that they have particular concerns about? I'm hesitant to jump into some of the actions. I think we want to try to keep it at the strategy discussion, perhaps. Yeah, Commissioner Osterman.
Yeah, thanks. I could just jump in at a high level about the strategies that resonated. So strategy 1, rezoning areas of Louisville. I agree with other commissioner comments. That resonated. I think that we would get a lot of bang for our buck with that strategy. Strategy 2 also resonated. So thinking about how codes can be updated and changed to allow more diverse housing. Strategy 3, supporting income-restricted housing, I thought was promising. And then also strategy 5, so focusing on more flexible infill development. And in general, the strategies that we're prioritizing infill development over developing greenfield were more, resonated more with me, and I'd like to see more of that. But I will say that within each of those strategies, when you get down to the action level, some actions resonated more than others. So
Sure.
Still kind of as a broad strategy, there wasn't one where, every box was checked, right? And then maybe just, while I'm still on the mic, if I could answer for me the question about what's missing and additional information. So I did have a question about inclusionary housing and the ordinance that we have, because I didn't see, well, first off, I didn't see any recommendations about increasing the ordinance level. So we currently have 12%. And I'm recalling the item that came to us maybe about a year ago And at that time, we were saying, well, let's wait until we have the housing study and until we have the data to really back any increase in the ordinance. And so I did feel like with the data that was presented in the housing study that still it wasn't strong enough to know if that topic comes up again, what would be the recommendation. So for me, that was the one piece that was missing, and I'm curious if there will be additional data, or for example, if it wasn't proposed as a strategy intentionally because it was felt by the housing study authors that wasn't a viable strategy, then it would have been helpful to have the rationale for that.
Can I respond to that? That's a great comment. I mean, that's been a really big focus of the study with the consultants, and I'm scrolling through and I actually don't see that, but we've talked a lot to them. I think you're going to see in the final report that there's going to be recommendations on those types of bonuses. So within the inclusionary, I mean, the idea is you know, if we're trying to work on a development, what's meaningful to them as far as a bonus to get more affordable housing. I think the preliminary information we're getting is that if you go to a cash and lieu model instead of a build it on site model, that that could be more meaningful, but it would be, yes, instead of the 12%, we get cash and lieu for an equivalent of a higher percent is what we're probably going to recommend. And then, you know, there'd have to be some bonus to the developer, more height, a little bit more density, something to make that more viable. So they've done pro forma economic analysis that'll be in the final report that demonstrates that's a good tool, at least on this market. Does that make sense? Hopefully,
Thanks, yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Summer, yeah, please join us again. Thanks.
I'm not sure that I understood that these ideas are part of the strategy, so I just want to bring them up. Maybe repurposing existing buildings or reevaluating them. So for example, office buildings that are vacant. In many cities, they're turning those into affordable housing. So those are existing buildings that don't need to be built, and we don't need to burden any greenfields with those. Also, I talked to Anne Marie Jensen of the East Boulder Housing Alliance, I think it's called, and she was going to advocate at the county level that cities could choose the kind of affordable housing types that they want. And one thing that she thought that I think is really ingenious for Louisville is that we could take money and buy existing small houses. Because that would be, those are houses where people would be integrated into neighborhoods. They would be in the community, they wouldn't be off in some other satellite area. And we wouldn't, I mean, they could go to, you know, be in the schools, be in the neighborhoods, and we preserve the small town character. I just have one question that I don't understand about this 12% amount of housing, which is to get that 12%, you have to build 78%, is that right? Of non-affordable housing, market rate, right? And so you just keep getting more and more housing, and the amount of affordable housing you're getting is not very much. So I don't know if that's a really good path to go down. It's like maybe we should just focus more on what we really need, which is the affordable housing, not just the small percentage.
Thanks. Ms. Bedell, if you ever want to speak, feel free to just wave. Yeah, please come on up.
Oh, hi, I'm Cindy Bedell. I'm a resident of Louisville, and I just have a question. So I find my really old notes here from a few years ago about how much each new resident costs the city. And this was Colorado Department of Local Affairs, long time ago, 97. But back then, the statistic was each new resident would cost at least $10,200. So I'm curious, do we have the current numbers? How much would each new resident cost the city of Louisville? Thank you.
Thank you. That's an interesting way of looking at things. I know with the fiscal model, it is a challenge.
Right, yeah, I mean, we have the complex fiscal model that basically answers that question, which is, you know, yes, I think the basic assumption is when you bring in residents, there's demand for new services. And, you know, generally the taxes that come in from that resident directly, either through direct spending or their property taxes, you wouldn't anticipate that would fully pay for their services. So that's the basic answer to that question. I think what we've been looking at is trying to look, again, more broadly or comprehensively, that if you bring residential into a parcel and you do that fiscal analysis within the bounds of the parcel, you'd probably assume some negative fiscal balance to the city if it has no commercial supporting development within that parcel. But if you look at an underutilized corridor that has a lot of vacancies or underperforming commercial properties, and you bring in residential development, that's not going to get captured in the model. That residential development kind of revitalizes the area and makes it a more attractive place, so you get more people coming into those existing commercial developments or fill those vacant buildings. Our fiscal model doesn't capture that revitalization. It's kind of like a secondary or tertiary, effect within the corridor that comes from, repurposing, especially an infill parcel.
Well, and it's also kind of if you boil it down, it's just a function of, you look at the city budget, where does the money come from? In any situation where where we benefit from sales tax from commercial properties, anytime we add more housing without a commensurate amount of commercial, then it's just raw numbers that, it will cost more. I wonder if DOLA has updated that number since '97, but.
And I wanted to add, one of the things we've noticed with our fiscal model is if the value of the housing is quite high, like near our average housing cost, you start to trend towards a positive fiscal balance. So if you're building $800,000 and $900,000 housing product, it may be fiscally positive. So we're also balancing kind of our desire for social policy of wanting affordable housing. So that's going to tend to be less fiscally positive, but we may have good reason, through other policies that we want to achieve, to have that more affordable product. That makes sense.
If I could, is that because of the use tax and the
So the amount of tax. So if you're
Okay.
having an $800,000 or $900,000 home, the way the fiscal model works is, well, there's the use tax of when you build it, but then there's the ongoing property tax, which we get a small amount of, but it's much higher for the city on a $900,000 home. And there's an assumption about household spending. So somebody who can afford a $900,000 home, they're going to spend more money in the city. We're going to get more sales tax. So that's where it looks fiscally, like with no commercial development at all, you could have a fiscally positive residential development, but it's very, very high end. And that's, we don't necessarily want to promote that just for the sake of fiscal balance, because we have competing policies.
Yep.
Right.
Interesting.
And that's also where it dives into a comment I made a month or two ago about, the commercial development, appropriate residential development begets commercial development, right? And good commercial development increases the catchment area for all of the commercial uses within or around that development, right? So we do the appropriate housing, more businesses want to come. When we get more and better businesses, our catchment area for people coming to those businesses increases beyond just the additional houses that were created, especially in areas where we are in proximity or close to other municipal interfaces, right? The McCaslin corridor, right? As Ms. Summers said, right? We've got a lot of empty commercial properties there. When we have additional appropriate residential development and those commercial properties get revitalized right off of 36, everybody going between Denver and Boulder, hey, that's a great stopover. On the east side, when we're looking at Courtesy Road, our catchment area expands to include areas of Lafayette and Erie and, other places like that. So I think, that goes back to, again, the ones that resonate with me of 1, 2, and 5, where I see that opportunity for the appropriate zoning to support infill, to support additional appropriate residential development, where the biggest strides are going to be made for the lowest amount of effort. in my opinion.
Commissioner Krantz, I saw you kind of raising your hand at some point.
No, that's all right.
No, okay, great. All right.
I was just trying to find the number.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. Any other? So as far as more feedback, what are you thirsting for?
Well, it's really these three questions. I think that, you can take it wherever direction you want. I think we're looking for, basically, we're taking your feedback and other folks' feedback to inform the actual draft of the housing plan. So we're logging all of your comments. I think the questions, again, is there something missing, which I'm not hearing? If there's something big missing, it seems like there's just nuance in each of these things that needs to be embedded. So I think that we're getting the feedback that we were looking for, and happy to keep listening. This is very helpful.
I would provide one other comment that kind of just solidified in my mind. When I read through, and similar to Commissioner Osterman, the statement about some of the actions don't always, all of the actions don't always check the box of the specific strategy. I think that some of this stuff might have some additional clarity if we were able to, and maybe again, it's not for each particular action, but maybe for a broader strategy, even identify a potential area of the city where that strategy would have a significant impact, right? Where that particular strategy would see a potential gain, through this or this or this type of implementation or this, type of action.
That's great. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to kind of jump on to that as well, which is I'm having a hard time sort of like in my mind prioritizing these in a strategy over one or the other. But I do feel like some are going to be, and I mean this, I guess I'm sort of stating the obvious, but some of these are going to be more appropriate in different parts of the town. And again, I think that to me is sort of starts to tie this back to the comprehensive plan and where what neighborhoods may, looking at kind of adjusting single family zoning or those kinds of things. There might be places like that in town that's going to be suitable for, and then other places where that won't be. And so at least for me, many of the strategies resonate with me, but they're going to play out differently across the city, I guess, is what I see. I'm sort of,
So,
yeah.
for instance, 5.3 allow ADUs both attached and detached on all
Yeah.
single-family lots citywide.
Yeah, that's a good
That
one.
way be
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
an issue
right.
in many ways, yeah. Yeah, please, come on up.
Yeah, the housing open houses are fine and all, but I think since, just what I've observed over the last 10 years is that, there's just kind of sometimes there's this push to get things done. I'm not saying that you're doing this right now. There's a push to get things done, and it's sort of like, we're just going to push this through. And then things fail a lot. And it's like, I really like this deliberative tone you're taking tonight, because I really think that if things are going to affect certain neighborhoods, it could be really good to have listening sessions with those neighborhoods and be totally transparent, build trust. If we want things to succeed, people want to succeed at things, but there's a lot of mistrust. And I think that, some of it's very rightly deserved. And I just think this is a great opportunity to build our community as we're working on policy and working on physical strategies to actually build the heart of our community if we're patient and listening.
Thanks.
Oh, please.
Maybe I'll jump in and just say a couple words. Yeah, I think some of the things that, I think ultimately the goals that we want to do is preserve some of the things everybody likes in the city. And the biggest challenge that I have is many of these actions and solutions compromise some of those things that we value in the city. And so we have to be very careful and thoughtful about how to create solutions that it would be great if it would enhance those things. These things are things that are mentioned before, like safety, accessibility, lifestyle, work-play balance. And when we say lifestyle, we say maybe balancing population with open space and parks. Like these kind of things are things people like in the city, among many other things. So the cautions are, and as I read through these and I've looked at them, I see few that improve those things, but many that maybe increase population density, which is not a bad thing, but it done cautiously, it can be done right. It will maybe increase traffic, increase demands on utilities. There are existing problems with water and electricity, increasing demand on city infrastructure and services. So when I look through these, I don't see many of the, I think this is a great outline and may be beneficial to go through each one, and there'll be many thoughts about each one, and we probably don't have time to do that. But I struggle to find many of the actions that actually help us get to preserving those things that we all like in the city. For example, 1.1, rezone and repurpose. I really like that idea, but how do you do that on a lot that's privately owned? Right, a commercial building that's privately owned. Would they voluntarily remove their structure, pay for the cost for that, and put up residential, what we would call affordable housing for less revenue? I don't know. These are, and you can go through each one of these and say, ADU, boy, that would be another big discussion. So that's what I'm having trouble balancing with each one of these items. I wasn't able to find one that said, man, that really would solve the problem. And maybe it's a culmination of the ones that would solve it for me.
I guess my thought is that in general, this is solid enough to move forward with. And that, right, there's process. It's not, none of these actions is gonna happen without process involved and input, additional input and outreach and any of that. So it's not that somebody's gonna sit downstairs in this building and just start with a red pen and start marking up neighborhoods. So while I think actually it is very important that, especially now, change is hard, and that when we start talking about making changes to stuff that already has been developed, non-greenfield development, that the outreach becomes even more important citywide, and I'm sure, I trust that will be all part of this, so. Additional thoughts?
And change can be good. You know, I mean, I remember being here 30 years ago and downtown was pretty different than it is now. And, you know, we've seen, I mean, the town grew, of course, over these last 30 years. And downtown has really responded, for example. And so I guess I appreciate that, and I know, I mean, I worry about where change is going to take us to, but it can also be something that can improve the town, so.
Definitely. I mean, you think about our areas right now that have kind of empty commercial spaces. Well, those are not the small town character places that we love, right? So, yeah.
I think just real quick, I wanted to respond to your comment, and it's another great example of the connection to the comp plan. We're talking about future land use and all that, but we're talking about values early on. And so to get at the core of what people value most, and then the idea is that's your foundation, right? And you sort of calibrate policies around that. So I think, not to punt on that, but that's a huge sort of like connective tissue between what we're doing and the comp plan is those values type discussions.
It'd be interesting to see how the comp plan differs from that in 2013. Of the top 3 priorities that citizens mentioned was open space and parks. Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see how things have changed. I think that the comp plan, as Commissioner Baskett was saying, the comp plan is probably going to be a culmination of all these things. We've done so many master plans, transportation, preservation, sustainability action plan. There's so many master plans that have been created over the last 5 or 10 years, and this is kind of the culmination of it. And I'm sure the comprehensive plan will reflect all of those plans. So it's a tricky one, for sure.
Please.
Yeah, I feel like there's still, I'm not sure if you got down that we were still missing some things in I mean, I understand it's great to move forward, but I loved what Commissioner Osterman said about us addressing the possibility of having an increased affordable housing percentage in exchange for rezoning, and if there's incentives that have to go along with that. I also liked what Ms. Summer said about us putting, considering repurposing office buildings and purchasing small houses as a city to preserve as affordable. I'm just kind of recapping things that I wanted to make sure that we considered, and I also wanted to just, I don't see any of these actions that directly affect the fire, people who are displaced because of the fire and have not been able to move back yet. So I just thought those were a few things that were missing. And while I've got the microphone, I was just going to just ask about, just reiterate about the additional information that we need. I think it would be really cool if we looked, I think the easiest way for me to visualize things, I like to visualize things in charts and matrices, and other people like to read it, but I feel like, to me, I want to see how we rank all these as they impact the things that are important, like our small town character, our need for open space, our need for a buffer between cities, our need for access to transit. There was a section in our report, I can't remember, it was section number 5, that really was great. It took out the sections of the policies in our comprehensive plan, the policies in our sustainability plan, and it laid out all these things that are important to us. So could we intersect those two matrices and rank these in terms of those policies that have been determined to be, I know those are changing, but we've got a transportation plan, and all those things that were related to housing were laid out, but they're not integrated into the strategies. And I think for me, it would be really helpful to see it, and I think for the public to be able to see and prioritize these things, because we've been asking people in these open houses what do you think is most important? But I don't think they're laid out. These are the ones that are really going to help us reduce our greenhouse gases. These are the ones that are going to help us, that maintain our greenfield spaces. I'd like to see it that way.
I think that's a great comment, and I also wanted to say that one of the things we'll be doing when you actually see the housing plan is looking at a better prioritization of these. I mean, there's 29 things to do, to break them down by near-term, long-term priority. I think that's a good way of looking at it, is to see how they intersect with the other plans as a sort of metric for how to prioritize. So I think that's really helpful.
And can I just add one more thing, just that I feel really strongly about? I feel really uncomfortable, and it's funny that we started this conversation when Commissioner Vasquez said that these are the numbers. This is what we can expect for our pro rata share of the growth of Boulder County. I don't feel, I would love to see this as like a low growth, a medium growth, and a high growth scenario, rather than just one scenario, because I'm afraid that because this is a housing needs assessment, when I read it, it looked like we were projecting that this is what we need. And I'm not sure that what's in those numbers, that we need 1,300 homes to serve people above 100% of the AMI. That's what it says in our report. I just feel like I would like to see like a difference, like different scenarios, and not those DOLA projections aren't dead on. I would like for the public to see a range rather than those numbers.
Please, Commissioner Vasquez.
I think that's a great idea. And I'd be interested to see if we can do something with that. The comment that I was going to make had to do with what's missing and what was alluded to kind of with acquiring houses, is that I don't believe there's any action strategy in there about forming a housing authority or having some function in Louisville, which I'm not at all advocating, because we're a small town, and I think that's way too much to take on. But I think what we need to remember when we think of some of these strategies, we always have to come back to the resources that are available. And that one made me nervous, acquiring housing, and somebody's got to purchase those deals, manage them, make them permanently affordable, or whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. So am I correct that forming a housing authority or forming some new arm of service is not included in the strategies?
Yeah, that is not included. You know, the city did have a housing authority maybe even 10 years ago. It hasn't been that long that we basically gave all our assets to the Boulder County Housing Authority, and we have an IGA with them, and they are our housing, they are our provider. The Boulder County Housing Authority is our provider through that IGA. So they, and we're actually working on another IGA with the city of Boulder and others where they can help us manage potential ownership programs and deed restricted programs that we're trying to accomplish. So we're working with those bigger communities that have more resources and knowledge to help us out.
Follow on specifically to staff. Is that in the strategies and actions? What you just said about the partnerships?
I don't know that it's explicitly called out, but I think in order to be successful in a lot of the actions, we will need to do that. Like if we, you know, if
Partner with Boulder.
yeah, it's not in the strategies. We can definitely add it. I think we probably don't see it because it's assumed to us that if we don't do that, we actually won't be able to do some of these things. But I think it's a great thing to add. Is to look for those partnerships.
Try to figure out where to add that in. Got partnerships in there, I know, but not specific.
It's, yeah, 6.3 has, but I think it could be more specific. I think that's a really good point.
That's an important one. Thanks. Any other thoughts missing? Have any other thoughts from either of you? Okay. Great. Well, how are people feeling? Where does that leave us? Sounds like staff, Jeff and Director Zakara, you're comfortable with where it's at this point. I know you've listened to a lot of other feedback from other groups, including council at this point. So
this is great. You kept it at the right level. You gave us specific things to work on and your overall sort of a comment. So this has been great. We'll be coming back to you. I don't have a date yet. Kind of depends on the drafting how the drafting is going, but probably January come back to you with a final plan or a draft plan. I think that's the target, but I'm not sure yet. But this has been helpful, and this will definitely inform the drafting. So appreciate it.
great. Thank you. People are comfortable with wrapping it? Yeah? All right. All right. With that said, then we'll just move into Planning Commission comments. Seems rarely we have many comments, but yes, please.
I have a question for staff. What is the status of the comp plan? Like, have you put an RFP out? Have you hired somebody? What?
Yeah, we do have a consultant under contract, and we're still kind of organizing, figuring out what the project structure is going to look like in terms of an advisory committee. All that kind of stuff is happening right now, what our engagement plan is. So we're very early. We do plan to come to Planning Commission with an update. That might be January as well. I'm not sure if it's going to be December. We'll be ready for it yet. But there'll be a more formal big update to Planning Commission soon. But we have a consultant team. We're just sort of getting organized internally still.
And who is the consultant?
So the lead consultant is called Design Workshop. And they've certainly done comp plans around the country, and they're a Colorado firm. And they've got certainly sub-consultants focused on specific areas. Farron Piers is their transportation sub-consultant. They have an environmental sub-consultant as well, which is a good resource to have in terms of resilience and hazard mitigation, all those kinds of things. So they've got a full team, and yeah, it's a big project and a big team, so I'm trying to get organized.
Who is doing the public involvement as part of that consulting team?
I think Design Workshop is leading that.
They've got special expertise in that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
you. Any staff comments?
We did have, I think, in your agenda, just to let you know, next month, a scheduled item is we're going to plan to bring you a zoning code amendment to address PUDs. And this is in the weeds, jargony, bureaucratic thing, but important. Expedited PUDs, meaning clarification of when somebody has to go to preliminary versus final and go through those two steps. So that's something we've been meaning to clean up for a while. So that's, I think, the only thing on the agenda for December, but there might be other things that come on, we're not sure yet.
Great, thank you. With that, then I would entertain a motion. Please, Commissioner Bass.
I've got one more thing, and
Sure,
then
yeah.
I'll make a motion
No,
to
please have
to
that.
adjourn.
Oh, well, no.
I went to the State of the City last night, and Mayor Maloney and Mayor-elect Chris Lay both spoke to the importance of the comp plan. And I think the audience was about 30% citizens and 60% business people who also may be residents, but it was a Chamber of Commerce sponsored function, so the audience was business people. It was an excellent forum with dialogue. So I just wanted to stress that our elected officials are holding up this as being a really critical path well taken opportunity to do the comp plan.
Great, thanks for sharing that. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in second?
Second.
Second, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The name incorporates her Vietnam roots.
The word bun itself means collective of different savory pastries, sweet pastries.
With a Parisian twist.
When you think about